I think we are all giving up on Eli Stowers way too soon. In my original video about Eli Stowers, if you guys remember, I did give a pretty stern warning that we should be patient and expect there to be some growing pains with Eli as an inline blocker in the run game in particular. I understand a lot of people were probably caught a little off guard with the fact that he didn't really emerge in camp and on 7-on-7 drills and one-on-ones. We didn't hear as much reporting around his athleticism and the way that he was attacking the footballs. We probably kind of anticipated at first. But I also think we have to be realistic to the fact that it is a new system. None of the tight ends that, I've heard a lot of information about, to be honest, even Dallas Goedert, it's been a fairly quiet camp if we're being real about it, guys. But we did finally hear the thing that we were kind of expecting when it came to Eli Stowers, which is, oh shit, Eli made a play. We've been waiting to hear those words, and we did finally get that report on day 10 of camp. But the reason that I'm out here preaching, patience when it comes to Eli is because when the young man finally got to the mic and when we've watched the actions of this young man during this camp, he's showing the attitude of a young man that's willing to work and earn his role on this football team. That's important.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a game where there's going to be ups and downs, and you just got to learn how to bounce back from adversity. No one who has ever played this game has ever been perfect, and the ones who are great are the ones that can bounce back from the adversity and go make the next play. So.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's talk about this tight end position as it pertains to Eli Stowers. And I kind of want to broach the topic a little bit that kind of explains some of the tight end tree we're coming out of, right? I mean, when I look at Eli Stowers, the tight ends that cross my mind, right? The guys that I'm like, oh, okay, like this is maybe not an apples for apples comparison, but it's the closest thing that we can kind of put this to, are players such as Darren Waller, who's a converted wide receiver to tight end that also, it took some time for him to be even a, middle of the pack blocker. And I think you can even make arguments that he never really became that in line as a tight end. If you go and you look at the Los Angeles Chargers and what they're doing out there with Arando Gazdin, like I think that's a very similar style player to even your Kyle Pitts, right? This idea of the athletically gifted, most of the times you're dealing with a player who is a convert to the position, and you're going to have to get unique in the way that you use them. I think that's going to be the Eli Stowers story, but let's talk a little bit about that story.
Of Diego Pavia. Tailback with him on drive number 2 is M.K. Young.
I think one of the first things that we have to understand is that from the skill positions on the offense, right? So I'm talking about, outside of quarterback. I don't think it's fair to compare the quarterback to any of these things. But when you're talking about like the wide receiver group, you're talking about the running back group, you're talking about the tight end group. In my opinion, you could probably make a pretty solid case that the position group that is going to go through the most changes with the shift and the responsibilities in the shift in scheme is the tight end position. That's the group that's now dealing with a brand new position coach, along with your offensive line guys, and also is impacted by the fact that the offensive line is also dealing with a new offensive line coach and is dealing with a new blocking scheme. Now you could say, well, wide receivers do too. I mean, they don't get as much credit for things, but, the wide receivers are going to be a part of this, essentially run game. Like these guys are going to be very important working up to the second level and being able to actually reach out there and get to blocks when it comes to outside zone and stretch stuff. Sure, but I think the burden on the tight end is a little greater, guys. Just like I would say the burden on the inside receiver is a little greater than the outside guys. I think part of the reason that most of the things that we're hearing reported from camp and the clips that we're seeing from camp are really centered around blocking with these tight ends is because I think that's going to be the thing where the techniques and things are going to be different. And the fact that, the likelihood of our success inside of this offense is largely going to come down to these guys doing their job and doing their job correctly. I think there's a reason why Johnny Munt is here. It doesn't take a lot of explanation here, guys. Johnny Munt's here because, the importance of getting this stuff down and understanding how these techniques work You need a veteran guy that's done it before. And, obviously he just came from the Minnesota Vikings, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, you're taking parts of Liam Cohen, formerly working with Tampa Bay, so he's obviously going to have some connections back here to our passing game coordinator in Philadelphia. And then, of course, the time in Minnesota and kind of the fact that, that's part of the Shanahan tree. So you get what I'm saying, guys. He's got the experience there. And, you got a guy like Eli Stowers. I would assume that Eli Stowers is going to be worked in a very unique way, especially when it comes to the run game, because I would take a wild guess to why we're going to see him attached to formation. I cautioned against it. That's not something that should be overly utilized, especially in his first year, maybe even arguably his second year. I will say that even detached from formation, he's still going to have a role within the run game and blocking. And, they're going to have to utilize that crazy athleticism this guy has,
Have piled up more than 300 yards of total offense. Pavia through the air.
You're going to have to find a way of figuring out how to use a dude with this type of speed, a guy who's jumping, over 45 freaking inches in the vertical jump. You're going to have to use this type of speed, guys. You're going to have to use this type of athleticism. You got to find a way of making the guy productive on the field. And I think his role is going to be a little unique, right? Because I definitely think he's more of that flexed option from the tight end position. I definitely think he's more of the, movement tight end, if you will. He's going to be the guy that, if he's successful, I think kind of like that. He's going to play that combined role of the Cameron Latu, what we saw last year. The BVS, the Ben Van Sumerins. I think he has to kind of not only be able to do that, he's also got to have to stand in almost like a slot position, where you're playing a power slot as a receiver. Was
Pitt. Here's Berlowitz to the end zone, caught.
I think his role is very unique, guys, and I do think it's going to take a little time for him to learn it. Let's keep in mind, while we're pretty good portion into camp, guys. I mean, we're 10 days into camp, and at this point, they have fully installed the offense. The offense is fully installed at this point. Nothing is new from this point forward. So in saying that, he's got to start picking it up now. But in the same breath, let's keep in mind, new offense, which for this young man, anything pretty much coming in was going to be new to him. And on top of that, it's the complexity of this offense. So, I give it a little leadway because this is not a guy that's supposed to be a starter from day one inside of the league to begin with. This is a guy that you're projecting that 2 years from now is going to be a hell of a player.
Is that easy for you? It's a challenge.
I think it's continuously getting easier for me, but I think that's something that's a challenge for a lot of people. And it's always a challenge when something bad goes down, and you just have to continuously learn how to just get back up, not worry about the last play, and continue on the next play.
And that kind of gets to my point a little bit about Eli Stowers. For me, I think this young man, you're trying to use his abilities the best you can and get him involved in the offense and allow him to start learning the playbook and affording him the time to develop and grow behind people that are really good football players. The Cameron Latus, maybe the E.J. Jenkins, even guys obviously Dallas Goedert is a very good football player, but, an older player at this point. And then the same can be said for Johnny Munt, an older but very good football player. He's got time to develop. And I do think that this young man needs that time to develop. You're looking at a young man who is essentially going to need an entire offseason eventually. That's the thing that sucks about the draft process, guys, is that, they spend so much time during that offseason preparing for the combine that once they get through the combine, you get this little brief period following the draft to where after that point, guys, they're pretty much getting thrown into camps. And I just don't think that they have the adequate time coming in as rookies to really fully prepare their bodies for things. And I think that's where the biggest jump can be made is, from the knowledge gap and in just finding what this guy can do from a matchup perspective, right? You're finding those little samples in the season to where you can get this guy lined up in a matchup and just see what he can do. And I think that, his body has to develop. I think even a guy like Michael Carter II showed us that, when Eli extended up for a catch and he got blasted from Michael Carter, Michael Carter's not the biggest guy in the league, but I told you guys when we made that trade that I thought Michael Carter was being a little undervalued by people. I thought Michael Carter was a damn good player, actually. Is one of those guys that, he's not Cooper DeJean. I don't think he's going to have the same trajectory as a Drew Makuba as a safety either, but I definitely think that he's a little slept on by the fan base. This is actually a pretty decent football player. With that said, you look at a guy like Eli Stowers and you see that even a guy like, Michael Carter II put him through the ropes a little bit there. I think you got to give this guy time to get into an NFL weight room. And I don't necessarily think the young man has to gain like a ton of weight. I don't think that's the trajectory, but he does have to get stronger. He needs to get NFL strength here, because at the tight end position, like, even if you're never going to be like a true inline wide tight end, it's never going to be his role. He may do that from time to time. I mean, everyone does it, guys. I mean, you can't. It sounds like I'm giving an an excuse to my parents here. You still have to be smart about the way you're using the young man. I mean, you don't see Kyle Pitts spending a lot of time in line as a wide tight end, guys. It wouldn't make any sense to use Kyle Pitts in that fashion, in that way. I think that the way that you see Kyle Pitts' utilization, the fact that Kyle Pitts needed some time to develop into an NFL receiver himself, I think you can say the same thing for Eli Stowers. A lot of tremendous upside with the athleticism. What was he, a John Mackey Award winner? Like, I mean, the young man has potential. The young man has talent. But yes, there's going to be a small and slight developmental phase. And I think, unfortunately for Eli Stowers, he's one of these players that's going to suffer from the perception, thing when it comes to Eagle fans, to where some people are just never going to let the McNeil Warren pick go because people really wanted that pick. And, it's one of those things where it's like, they didn't make the selection, guys. That's not the direction the Eagles wanted to go, and we can't really hold that shit against Eli Stowers, guys. We have to judge Eli Stowers on what he is as a player. And you got to show a little faith in the organization. They've been damn good with these draft picks recently. Of course, we don't hit on every pick. Of course, you have some misses here and there. With that said, I mean, they've done a damn good job over the last 4 or 5 draft classes in particular.
That's his tight end, Stowers. Oh, he's barreling off of white jerseys.
Eli Stowers is one of those prospects that I think is going to take a little time to launch. But I think once we finally see the vision that the Eagles had for the player, and the player develops, and I mean develops in terms of the football, side of things, in terms of understanding the scheme and the system and what the responsibilities and the roles are, but I also mean physical development too. Like, this is a young man that, needs to gain NFL strength for the position. And yes, we discussed here, he's never going to be like the traditional, think 1980s guys, early 1990s, Mark Bavaro style tight end guys. He's never going to be that guy. But what I think will be interesting with this guy is when he finally figures out and he feels comfortable in the scheme, and that realization sets in that, hey, wait a minute, I'm bigger, for the most part, equal physically or more physical and more athletic than any person that's covering me. I think that's where shit's going to get interesting with Eli Stowers. He's going to have to go through that phase where, come on, man, figure it out. Come on, bro, figure it out. But once he figures it out, it's going to be like, yeah, this dude can play ball. This dude's a threat. I think it'll take time for him to kind of develop into that. I don't think it's going to be, I think in September, man, you're probably not. I would be shocked if he's even active on game day rosters to start the season, just because, I just think that you have to find a way of pulling down so many players, and you got to think about who's realistically ready to contribute in September. Now, when we start getting towards the end of October into the beginning of November, that's where I think certain guys have got to start. Now you got to start paying your dues, right? Now, if you're the Eli Stowers, you're the Mekhi Lemons of the world, now you have to start. You have to start making an impact to the actual offense. Because at this point, you can no longer just be a special teams contributor with the value of where you were drafted. And at that point, you can't really use the lack of knowledge of the scheme and your first NFL experience as an excuse. You kind of got to come around at that point. It doesn't mean they got to be the stars of the team yet, but they got to be contributors by that point is what I'm getting to, guys.
That's his tight end, Stowers. Oh, he's barreling off of white jerseys.
All right, Eli Stowers. One of the most controversial players on this team right now. One of the most controversial picks during the 2026 NFL Draft. This one, it's probably going to take a couple years to resolve it, man. It's going to take some time to find out who's right or wrong on this particular situation when it comes to Eli Stowers, to be honest. But with that said, man, I do think that from a talent perspective, I mean, there's something to be excited about here. There's a reason to say, like, it's going to take time for this young man to put it together, but man, when you look at the spare parts, there's something here to work with, man, to be quite honest. All right, y'all, if you guys want more content like this, I'm going to throw you up a video right here that is performing very well on YouTube that kind of goes over, once again, we're talking about this whole Sean Mannion scheme, and I'm going over one of the most important aspects of Sean Mannion's scheme and why he's bringing people closer to the box. And then over here, guys, I'm going to throw up a player evaluation. I'm going to throw you up a video that kind of talks about, one of these guys that we can get hyped up for since we got preseason football coming up. So I'll throw you up a video right here about that, y'all. All right. Hey, man, I really appreciate you guys liking, commenting, and subscribing on the videos. For all y'all that are hitting that hype button, hey, man, it's well. Appreciate it, y'all. And with that said, guys, I got to get out of here. Peace. I'm out of here.